Hello and welcome to my channel, The Flute Nerd. I'm Alexandra and I'm, well, a flute nerd. Today I thought I'd share some tips and exercises that you might find helpful if you're practicing the flute in a city or residential area and you're worried about keeping your neighbors happy. So let's jump in. As much as we love the flute, it's not to everyone's taste. And even if your neighbors enjoy hearing the flute, they may not like hearing it all day, every day, which is fair, I guess. For this video, I've tried to put together a few tips and exercises that you might find helpful. I will put timestamps in the description below so you can just skip ahead to the exercises if that's what you're here for. But first, I thought we'd talk about some tips on how to deal with your neighbors. The first thing I found helpful is to be proactive. If you don't know your neighbors already, introduce yourself and explain that you are trying to learn the flute and how excited you are about learning the flute, but that you also recognize that it could cause some noise issues. Hopefully this will help you feel relatable and build a relationship with your neighbors to make dealing with this much easier in the future. Chat with them about what their schedules are like. Maybe there are days that they're often away from home that would be good for you to practice, or they might have regular Zoom meetings or little kid nap times that would be particularly bad for you to practice in. Having this conversation will help you put together a practice schedule that will suit both of your needs. And don't forget to ask them to approach you directly if they have any issues rather than going to the police or the council first. This will save you a lot of heartache, I promise. Secondly, be respectful. If they've offered some times that would be good or bad for you to play, try to work around that schedule when you practice. And if you absolutely have to practice at unsociable hours, or maybe during one of those times they suggested might be really bad, try to use one of these quiet or silent practicing exercises that we'll talk about in just a second. Avoid practicing really early in the morning or really late at night. I mean, even a flute nerd does not want to be woken up at 6 a.m. in the morning to some 4th octave long tones. I mean, give it a break. If possible, try to find a room in the center of your house for your practicing. This will help eliminate sharing walls with your neighbors and hopefully add a bit of a buffer. Otherwise, try to pick a room that is carpeted or has a lot of soft furniture, as that will help dampen the sound as well. If you are particularly worried about upsetting your neighbors with your practicing, you can invest in some soundproofing. There are so many soundproofing options out there for every single budget, including even hiring a practice soundproof booth to be installed in your home. Wouldn't it be lovely to be that rich? I'm sorry, where were we? One of the cheapest and easiest options, though, is to buy acoustic sound foam. Kind of looks like this. You can buy them on Amazon, relatively cheap. They come in packs of like 6 or something, and you can easily install them on the wall to help deaden the sound. You can see we've used little Velcro things to stick them to the wall, and then they come off very easily. So let's say you still need to practice even though it's unsociable hours or a time when your neighbor has specifically asked you not to practice. Here are 7 of my favorite exercises that are either extremely quiet or completely silent that are great for practicing when you have to keep your neighbor happy. Each one of these is actually very valuable practice, so it shouldn't feel like you're compromising your progress. You will still see yourself get better. In fact, you should probably try to incorporate just about every single one of these exercises in your normal practice, whether you have to be quiet or not. Number 1 are whistle tones. Whistle tones are, well, kind of exactly that. They sound a bit like whistles. They sound a little bit to me like a hob tea kettle, a very quiet hob tea kettle, if you're doing them correctly. These sounds are made by sending an extremely focused and slow stream of air across the embouchure hole. You should be able to get whistle tones on just about any note, and depending on the note, you can probably get quite a few of this series of harmonics on top of it. You will probably find that some fingerings are easier to sound than others. I personally find my A is pretty solid and an easy go-to. In order for these to sound, the air has to be extremely slow. Like, imagine sending a single molecule of air across the flute embouchure hole. If you go a bit too fast, you might hear a bit of an airy sound or actually speak a note, and that means that you need to slow that air way, way down. It almost feels like you're not sending any air into the flute. These whistle tones will also sound better when your embouchure is extremely round. So really try to focus on the center muscles of your lips to get that round shape. So as you can see, whistle tones are really great for your breath control because you have to be very specific about the amount of air that goes over the flute, and also for your embouchure control. So really trying to get that round shape to your lips without removing your lips from your teeth. So you don't want to go too much like this because it's just not going to work. So these are great exercises to incorporate in your everyday practice, but they're also conveniently quiet. Exercise number 2 is practicing pianissississimo, but with resonance. Sometimes when we're working on our tone, we focus on a pretty healthy, strong, but resonant sound. That's kind of the goal that we're working for. But it's easy to forget that we also need that same level of resonance when we're playing very quietly. So this is a great exercise for practicing if we need to keep that resonance, but play really, really, really quiet. For this exercise, I would suggest choosing a note, probably a low register note, because it's very easy to play those with very little amounts of air to really work on being very, very, very quiet. As you get a little bit better in this exercise, you can try some of the higher notes and see if you can still play very quietly with that resonance. Start by blowing just a trickle of air into the flute, and perhaps you're going to end up getting a whistle tone if you've got the correct shape of your embouchure. Slowly increase that speed of air until you just catch the note and actually start playing. So now that you've got a note sounding, try to keep the amount of air the same, because the amount of air will change our volume. Volume changes volume. But we're going to try to increase the resonance. So there are different ways you can kind of think about this. A lot of people suggest changing the vowel shape in your mouth to more of an oh rather than an ooh, because it's very tempting on the quiet notes to be very clenched up. We want to be very open oh on that note. The other thing you can think about is trying to imagine that you're resonating that sound deeper in your chest, almost like a singer might. Let's see if I can demonstrate the sound moving from more of an ooh sound to an ah sound while playing really quietly. I'm not sure my mic is going to be good enough to pick this up, but let's try. And if you want, you can try even diminuendoing from there, because that resonance opens up the sound a little bit that perhaps you can come back even further. And don't forget your tuner. Quiet notes will almost always be flat. So try checking it with your tuner to make sure that you can keep the speed just fast enough to keep the note up. Exercise number 3, I like to call shhhh playing. Now, I'm not shushing you, even though this is a video about playing quietly. I'm asking you to play something making a sound shh over the flute rather than actually playing a note. So for example, you could play a scale or a pattern or a passage from a piece, but with a shh sound over the flute. That shh sound provides a bit of resistance that allows me to kind of concentrate on my breath support to make sure I feel like I've got a really supported stream of air going into the flute throughout that passage, scale, or phrase. You could practice this exercise without the flute at all, just going shh, and really engaging your abdominal muscles for that sense of support. But I quite like attaching that sense of breath control and resistance to an actual phrase or passage, because I can kind of feel what I need to do to make that sound if I was playing normally, but without making the sound. Exercise number 4 is playing with a relaxed embouchure lower down on the head joint. Now this is a great one if you need to work on relaxing your embouchure. Now that could be because you've taken a break and you can feel yourself tensing up a little bit, or maybe you're going through the proverbial embouchure change. Dun, dun, dun. I feel for you, man. I have been there. For this exercise, you're going to hold the flute up like normal, but you're going to place your mouth a little bit lower down on the head joint so that you're not actually blowing into the tone hole. This will allow you to focus on just playing that really relaxed embouchure without having to worry about what kind of sound we're going to get out. I would suggest playing a scale or a passage with this exercise because it kind of helps you focus on what we would have to do with our embouchure without worrying about what the sound is going to come out. And so for this one, really focus on allowing those corners to stay relaxed as possible. We don't want our embouchure to pull really tight into a smile or even tight into a frown, but you really want your mouth to be as relaxed as possible and feel your face and your jaw just kind of hanging there. If possible, try to imagine you're moving with a register. So say you're working up a scale, that you're going to go from a low register blowing down to a high register, all while keeping that nice and relaxed. Exercise number 5 is to practice with your fingers only. Anyone who has ever played in a band or ensemble already knows this trick. While the conductor is talking to some other section, flute players love to sit in the back and be like, but you can actually use this as a real exercise, and there are 2 different ways that you can think about it. First, you can hold the flute so that you can actually see your fingers. To make this exercise useful, you have to pay super close attention to your fingers and make sure that they are working very precisely and accurately. You can also think about how relaxed can you get your fingers to work while still pushing the buttons. I like to think about it like channeling my inner surfer dude. Be like, yeah, man, I'm just chill. I'm just pushing some buttons. But you should also try practicing this exercise with your flute held in playing position, because this will essentially mimic exactly the same movements you have to do. But by taking sound out of the equation, we can really focus on the kinetic feeling of our fingers moving and going to exactly the place they need to go. So this exercise is brilliant for building muscle memory, and especially if you have some passages or scale patterns that feel particularly uncomfortable. Exercise number 6 is a 2-for-1 breathing exercises. Excellent flute tone comes from excellent breathing. Now that may seem like an obvious thing to say, but it is very easy to forget. Practicing our breathing is probably almost as important as practicing everything else that we do. Our sound comes from our air, and if we're not breathing and blowing correctly, we're never going to be able to make nice music. This first exercise, you want to inhale very deeply, thinking about filling your lungs all the way to the bottom. Now, in order to do that, I like to imagine that my butt is hollow and I'm breathing all the way into my butt. And trust me, there is a lot of space in there to fill. The other way you can think about it is trying to breathe out. Breathe into your back and your front. We don't want to be breathing up like this or into the chest, which means we're only really breathing up here. Our breathing should be very deep. And you should almost feel like you're sinking into the breath. Our spine actually shortens as we breathe in and expand. Once you've taken your deep breath in, you want to continue taking very small breaths after that until you feel like you cannot take any more. Now, I have to add a warning to this exercise. Do not push that too far. You can actually strain or hurt something. So take it to the limits, but not your absolute limits. Just feel healthily full. And once you feel completely full, relax and exhale all of your breath. For the second breathing exercise, I want you to exhale and keep going until there is absolutely not a single drop of air left in your lungs. Try to imagine you're drinking a Capri Sun thing and you're trying to get out every single last drop. Once you've let out every drop of air possible, just hold it there for a tiny second. And then all you need to do is just relax and let the air reflexively come back into your lungs. You'd be surprised at how full our lungs can be without actively breathing. The breathing in should just be natural and completely reflexive. Do not try to do any active breathing on the way in. Exercise number 7 is armchair practicing. My teacher used to call mental practice armchair practicing, implying that you're doing this kind of practice from a comfy armchair rather than a stuffy practice room. There are a couple of ways to do armchair practicing, but one of my favorites is to listen along to a piece of music, to a recording that you have, while following along with the score. This is also known as active listening. If it's a chamber or ensemble piece, try to listen to how all the parts fit together. Sometimes it's really easy to get so wrapped up in your own part that it's hard to remember or understand how all of the things fit together. But with active listening, you kind of have that mental space to take in the entire picture. Try listening to the phrasing that the performer you've chosen to listen to uses in the piece. Are there any breathings that you find very interesting, or perhaps ones that seem to surprise you? Are there any musical decisions that you think are amazing and you want to add into your own playing? Or perhaps you don't really agree with and want to avoid doing? Pay close attention to changes of tonality, mood, or color in the piece, and make notes in your score. Another effective way to armchair practice is to visualize playing. Now, there are so many studies out there that have proven that if you do mental practice with physical practice, you are so much more likely to have success than just physical practice alone. That's like mind-boggling when you think about it. Visualizing the movements that we have to make while playing fires the same synapses in our brain as if we were actually moving those muscles. So this way we can build the same muscle memory without using the muscles. But note that doing this exercise means you absolutely have to concentrate on that sensation. Really try to pay attention to the kinetic feeling of what it would be like to play a certain finger passage or scale pattern. The visualization should feel as specific as possible. Vague visualization is not going to give you results. Vague visualization, that is a tongue twister. This exercise is particularly helpful if there is a particular passage or pattern that causes your fingers to go really tense or even just slightly tense. Use this exercise to visualize what it would feel like if you played really relaxed. What would it feel like to make those movements with fluidity and ease? Visualizing that can have such profound effects on your actual playing. It's just mind-boggling. I hope you found these exercises and tips helpful when dealing with your neighbors as a new musician, but it's just not an easy thing, right? We are sort of disturbing the piece, but you will be surprised at how many of your neighbors actually enjoy the fact that they've got a musician nearby. The amount of people that walk by later and will tell me, "Are you the one who plays the flute?" It's so nice hearing that, which is a little nerve-wracking that they're obviously paying attention, but it's quite nice to hear. Most people will appreciate having some music being played next door. If you found this video helpful, please do let me know in the comments, and be sure to click subscribe so that you'll get notifications as new videos come out. I will be releasing regular flute tip videos and would love to have you join the Flute Nerd family. Until next time, happy fluting!